Merida, the princess who challenged fate. In the wild hills of the Highlands of Scotland, where the winds carry ancient songs and the woods hide forgotten mysteries, a young woman with a free spirit called Merida lived. Daughter of King Fergus and Queen Eleanor, she grew up between rigid traditions and ancestral legends, but never allowed the title of princess to shape her indomitable essence. While Dunbrach's kingdom followed millennial customs, Merida preferred the freedom of forests, the silence of the trees, and the vibrant sound of her bow when she reaches invisible targets. Her red hair, as rebellious as she, seemed to dance with the wind whenever she rode her faithful mare, Angus. With the arrival of adulthood, the allied clans were summoned to the castle to dispute their hand in marriage, an old ritual designed to strengthen alliances. But Merida did not accept being a competition prize. Disagreeing, she claimed the right to fight for herself, and won, shocking everyone, including her mother. The tension between mother and daughter increased, culminating in an impulsive escape. Guided by strange blue spirits, the will-o'-the-wisps, small floating flames that, according to legend, lead to the change of destination, Merida found an ancient hidden cabin in the forest. There, an eccentric woman, master in witchcraft, offered her an enchantment that promised to change her mother. The spell, however, brought unexpected consequences. Eleanor was transformed into a huge bear. Without understanding the severity of the situation at first, Merida was faced with an urgent journey to undo the error before the curse became permanent. At dawn on the second day, together, mother and daughter traveled dark woods, faced dangers, and rediscovered the forgotten ties that united them. It was in this silent reunion, between gestures, memories, and looks, that Merida understood the true meaning of courage. It was not just about breaking traditions, but of listening, understanding, and making room for change, both in the world and within itself. Reconciliation, marked by a sincere gesture of repentance, undid the curse. Eleanor returned to the human form, and the clans, witnesses of everything, began to see Merida with new eyes. She had rewritten her own story without denying her roots. Since then, in the legends told by the fireplace, it is said that there is a princess of the tall lands that has not surrendered to the expected path. Instead of following trails already taken, she chose to create yours. And with that, he reminded everyone that the true destination is not imposed, is chosen. The forests that embrace Dunbrach keep more than ancestral trees. There, between moss, covered stones, and hidden trails for time, they sleep secrets of past ages. Merida, by touching this enchanted territory, did not arouse just a spell. He activated ancient forces that require courage of spirit and truth of heart. The will-o'-the-wisps, those small dancing lights, did not appear by chance. In the old Celtic traditions, they are guides between worlds, messengers of the invisible. When Merida followed them, he didn't just seek to change his mother. Deep down, he tried to break free from the image that everyone projected on her. The desire was of transformation, but she did not know that this change would come through pain, error, recognition. Upon seeing Eleanor transformed into a beast, a reversal happened. The mother, a symbol of order, tradition, and royalty, was dominated by primitive instincts, while Merida, the rebel, became the rational link, the bridge between chaos and healing. The cycle was reversed, so that both could understand the roles they refused or imposed on each other. During the journey through the woods, they faced not only physical dangers, but also their own inner rigidity. The communication is no longer verbal. It was made of gestures, actions, silences. It was in this space between words that the true loop referred. The spell, initially perceived as punishment, was revealed a mirror. It showed what had been silenced, denied, forgotten. The presence of Mordu, the former prince transformed into a monster by excessive ambition, served as a warning. He represented what happens when power is sought without balance, when the ego chokes the soul. Merida, in facing him, was not just fighting a physical creature, but against the fate that tradition wanted to impose it. Overplaying it was to seal a choice, not to follow in the footsteps of those who came before, but to honor them by opening a new way. When the sun touched the horizon in the second dawn, and Eleanor returned to the human form, something deeper had changed. The kingdom of Dunbrach, witness to their transformation, understood that strength is not rigidity, and that wisdom can come from youth when she speaks to the heart. Since then, Merida has not only been remembered as a princess, but as the unlocked path guardian, symbol of a generation that does not fear breaking silence, questioning inheritances, and seeking a destination built with her own hands. On the nights when the wind travels the mountains with a light and persistent blow, some say you can still hear the wisps calling not to lose, but to remember. Those who hear their calls are not running away. They are coming back to themselves. After Eleanor's return to its original form, it was not just the bond between mother and daughter who restored. The whole kingdom breathed a new air. Old conventions that previously seemed unqualified began to crumble, not with shouts or revolts, but with the subtle power of revealed truth, the one that is born when someone has the courage to be who he really is. Merida, without realizing it, had broken an ancestral cycle, that of blind obedience. By denying herself being a currency in alliances, when placing herself at the center of her history, she released not only herself, but also the women who would come later. For the first time, the fate of a princess was not sealed by political alliances, but by conscious choice. Queen Eleanor, once a prisoner of formality, recognized in her daughter what always existed within her, the silent force that had been erased by the demands of the throne. Experience as a Ursa did not embarrass her. On the contrary, he brought him a new vision. To reign is not to impose but guide. To educate is not to shape, but to awaken. The people of Dunbrach, in turn, were reflected in that transformation. Clan, accustomed to rivalry and pride, began to see that there is more power in listening than in the imposition. New agreements were formed not with swords, but with words. And in the castle tower, where weddings were once decided, now ways, desires, and vocations were discussed. Merida came to be seen with reverence, but not for carrying a crown. It was admired by his unbreakable spirit, for daring to fail, learn, and redo. He became a counselor, archer, forest voice, and protective of the old paths. He did not abandon his arrows, nor the gallops next to Angus. He continued to visit the woods, where from time to time, the will-o'-the-wisps still emerged, as if approving every step with their hearts open. On his face, the youth remained, but his eyes now brought the glow of those who faced the invisible and returned wisely. Not by chance, the elders of the kingdom began to call her the one who listens to the earth, for Merida understood that the world does not speak for shouts. He whispers in the winds, in instincts, in choices. Merida's legend is not an end, but at first, a milestone where the old and the new intertwine. She did not destroy the roots, just dug enough deeply to replant them consciously. And since then, in every sunrise on the Scottish mountains, they say that it is possible to hear the sound of an arrow crossing the sky, reminding everyone that fate is not a written path. It is a designed trail, step by step, by those who dare to choose. There are stories that live prey to time, and there are those that cross it. Merida's belongs to the second. Not because she is a princess, but because she represents a truth that can no longer be silenced, the right to choose her own course, even if it means counteracting everything that came before. In the older archetypes, there was always a figure that arose between chaos and order, a guardian of the new, who broke the strings of what was expected and planted renewal seeds. Merida became this bridge, not a warrior in the traditional sense, but a carrier of the arrow that does not hurt, but directs. His arc was not served to war, but to clarity. Each shot was a statement. Here I am. I will not be shaped. I will be intact. In the silence of the mountains, she became a symbol, not as marble, but as fire, wild, unpredictable, alive. His name did not just echo in the castle's halls, but in the forests, on the banks of the rivers, among the whispers of the women who someday silent. Queen Eleanor, who once wore the skin of authority, now understood that true leadership is born of listening, and he understood that the daughter was not an out of curve mistake, but the curve that dodges from the error. And with that, mother and daughter not only rebuilt a relationship, but founded a new lineage, the one that honors both legacy and freedom. What about the people? They have learned that kingdoms do not fall for change, but collapse in stagnation. What tradition and transformation are not enemies. They are sisters, as long as there is mutual respect. And in the squares, among stories told at the foot of the fireplace, the children started to play with being Merida, not by the crown, but for the courage. And the will-o'-the-wisps? Ah, these lights continue to wander the woods. They always appear for those who, as Merida, feel that there is something beyond the visible trail. They do not indicate security, point the truth, and few follow them. But those who do it never return the same. Because in the end, Merida is not just a young woman with flaming hair and free spirit. She is every person who silently shouted for change. It is the break with the fate imposed. It is the whisper that there is another way, more honest, more true, more yours. And if one day, when you come across a difficult choice, you feel an inexplicable call, maybe it's just a wisp, remembering that fate is not written in stone, but yes, molded, step by step, by the courage of those who decide not to follow the expected. You don't have to be king's daughter to recognize yourself in Merida. Just have felt the invisible squeeze of expectations once in life. Just makes sense for the soul to want to run, while everyone asks you to kneel. Merida is the reflection of every spirit that does not fit in molds, which refuses to passivity disguised as education, which he knows, even without understanding how, that there is something greater than the role attributed. She taught that fate is not traced. It is a daily choice, that there is no honor to follow what hurts the essence, and that daring to make mistakes with truth is nobler than obeying with fear. In his silence, he learned to hear the forest. In his mother's eyes, he rediscovered his root. In the fury of the beast, he understood the weight of what is not healed. It didn't break the world. He healed himself. It did not destroy the tradition, redesigned its shape. He didn't run away from the role. He rewritten the story. And now your name lives as a symbol, not of royalty, but of conscious freedom. Because there is a Merida in every person who dare to question, that listens to the call of the invisible, even without map. That chooses the truth, even if it costs everything. Those who follow the lights, who walk where no one dared, they do not seek applause or power. They seek only consistency with their own soul. And when the world seems to crumble under the weight of, it has to be like this, remember Merida, the one who chose the instinct instead of the script, the one who heard the whisper of the trees and said, I am, and that, it was enough. And so the cycle closed, not with doors knocking, but with open ways. Merida didn't have to win dragons, climb towers, or kiss charms. His war was another, silent, intimate, stuck in the soul. He fought against the invisible walls of how it should be, and won with the arrow of the choice, pointed inside. The transformation she provoked was not noisy. It was firm. It was real. It started at home, between mother and daughter, and spread like embers in dry firewood, slow, but inevitable. Each gesture of her became a seed, germinating not in castles, but in hearts. Dunbroch followed existing. The royalty, the clans, the rights, nothing disappeared. But everything has changed, because when a single person chooses the truth instead of obedience, a new time begins to be born. Merida remained. He did not depart in exile, nor is he isolated himself like other mythical figures. She stayed, in the center of what they once tried to delete her. He lived alongside his, as a bridge between what it was and what it could be. He became guardian of stories, a symbol of permission, reminds that courage is not to challenge the world by pride, but remain faithful to his own voice, even when the whole world offers silence in return. And when the years passed and the winds changed, it was not in statues or tapestries that the people honored them. It was in the girls who came to say no firmly, in boys who have learned that listening is also strength, in mothers who started asking what their daughters dreamed, instead of saying what they should be, in leaders who understood that authority is not imposed, it is conquered by example. Merida did not become legend to be remembered. It has become a lighthouse, so that others don't get lost. And even when no one else remembers your name or the name of your kingdom, the spark she lit will continue, in each choice made with courage, in every voice that refuses to be silent, on every path outlined with her own feet. Because in the end, Merida was not just the princess who challenged fate. It was, and always will be, the living memory that freedom begins the moment someone says, I choose to be who I am. And right now, the world changes forever.